is 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time where I am, or Eastern Daylight Savings Time, I guess, where I am. But for my guest, it is like what?
Like 2 in the morning. Sorry, yeah, five past. It's
Two.
2 a.m.
It's
Yeah,
2
so I
a.m.
am a bit like that right now. It's 2 a.m. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us at this late hour. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes, I am Paco Garcia, and I run GMS Magazine and a little endeavor as well called Mindscape Publishing, where I publish RPGs. And in GMS Magazine, I cover all sorts of games from all tabletop games like role-playing games and board games as well.
Right. And so we brought you on the show on the Friday Night Forums to talk specifically about your role in participating in the Tabletop Mentorship Program. So we'll get to that in a couple seconds, but I want to know a little bit more about you. First of all, I'd like to say happy end of Pride Month to everybody who celebrated Pride Month. It's wonderful. It's good that it happens. Love is love. Don't ever let that stop. And I want to know a little bit more about you, Paco, because we've talked a lot before, but I
Mhm.
never really got to know you. So you are definitely doing editing and things like that through the magazine, but you're also designing and all sorts of stuff. So tell me about your origin story. How did you get into gaming, board games, RPGs, whatever, and what was the like the road that you took to get you to here, which is doing stuff.
Oh God, that is a very long story. So I will try to make it
We've
as
got a
short
lot of
as
time.
possible. Okay, how I started with role playing games? Well, I started into Dungeons and Dragons before I got into RPGs. In fact, I had no idea that RPGs existed, but I knew Dragonlance very very well because I happened to received Dragons of Autumn Twilight just when it was released in Spain by sheer accident at a time where it literally saved my life. I was a child with massive issues of bullying and lack of adaptation at school, and I was, trying to kill myself. And that book gave me the escape I needed to continue one more day and one more day because I just
Right.
loved it. And from there, I went into fantasy and Tolkien and all sorts of things. And eventually, I found out that D&D was actually a role-playing game. I thought, well, okay, what the bloody hell is this? I had no
Okay,
idea.
so you're saying that you found D&D not through the game but through the novels.
Correct.
Oh,
Yes.
I see. Okay, cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And then, because RPGs in Spain are a very weird thing. RPGs in Spain, they arrived very late. And by the time they started, because translation is expensive and there were very few people who could actually afford to do it, people preferred to write their own game. So
Sure.
eventually I got into Lord of the Rings, the red box, and it was an absolutely horrific experience. It was really bad because we were very young, we didn't know what we were doing, and my friend decided that it would be really fun if two big lizards killed my character within an hour of having started playing, which was a bit like, yeah, this is frustrating. I don't like this. But I read the book rather than giving up because it was Lord of the Rings and I knew it and I loved it. And I thought, damn, there's a lot of potential in here. So I kept reading, and then I found another group where I played D&D, and that also started as a very strange experience because it was early 90s, and it felt very much like the players versus the GM.
Right.
Like that was something that happened. So I just got in love with it, and I kept playing and 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 playing. And I learned about Lovecraft through them, and I learned about Ghostbusters through them, and I learned about Jack Vance through them, and they became like my passion since ever. And I haven't stopped playing, basically, or writing or designing.
Right. So role playing games saved your life.
Mhm.
Role playing games became something that you were uh, spending a lot of time doing. You were intimately knowledgeable about. And so, when did the transition happen for you to become a writer of these games, not just a player of these games?
Well, very early on, because we used to publish our own fanzine in town. Um,
Oh, okay, cool.
we used to have a group of friends, and we had two fanzines. But one of them, the one I wrote for, was called Enrólate, Enroll.
Okay,
We were that original at the time. Yeah.
sure.
So I just started writing, and then I stopped. But then I decided that a few years ago, I decided, it would be really cool to be able to bring games from Spain to the English speaking market. So I joined with a Spanish publisher, and I tried to do it. So I found a translator for Aquelarre, and I found a German publisher for the Unsprechlichen Kult, Unnameable Cults, Cultos Innombrables. But then I found out that professional practices in Spain are not that particular professional, so we just thought, yeah, you're not going to pay me for my work. I'm not going to keep working for you. Thank you very much indeed. And I stopped there. I tried to do my own publishing in Spain, but I must admit I was not able to adapt to how geeks think in my country. I grew up as a geek very much in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
That's where I moved in '98, and I became more familiar with the Anglo-speaking way of thinking about game and gaming. And because I have a huge amount of friends in the United States, I don't know how to say this in a polite way, but the geeky culture of the RPG, the gaming culture in general in the UK and the USA and Canada and North America, it's miles ahead. We
Okay,
still have
in what way?
we still have conversations in Spain, and this is still a massive issue. We have debates about, is D&D an RPG or not?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I get it.
So is that kind of thing where I just look at that kind of conversations and I think I'm not interested. I'm a lot more interested in finding out how can you make mechanisms to enhance relatability and empathy within a role-playing game. I'm more interested in finding out what is the world around the role-playing game. I'm not interested in I'm sorry to say this in this way, but I'm not interested in petty discussion about something that is got absolutely zero impact on what or how I play, and to lose friendships.
It is interesting because even just yesterday there was this whole discussion on a couple of forums where somebody from Festival, Max Moeller from Festival, which is a festival in, I don't know where. I want to say Denmark, but that's wrong. So it could be Sweden, but that could also be wrong, which might mean it's Finland. So I will look it up. But anyway, he wrote "Board games are art," and the amount of flack that he got from people, one person in particular, was like enormous, and then a lot of pushback on that person from everybody else. So it's just an interesting thing where we have all these discussions online, Twitter, whatever, Facebook, and I get it that some people are beyond that discussion, or not even beyond it in like a lofty, highfalutin way. Just like, I don't even want to talk about that. Like, let's just make games and don't debate it, and just like, this is a game and we'll play it and it's fun and it's interesting. When you get down to like the really academic, quote unquote pedantic level of things, with things like, is this an RPG or not? Or if you give narrative control to your players, you're not playing an RPG. All those kinds of things are very reductive and very self-limiting. And I don't know if there's a real benefit to talking about those types of things in a way as a seasoned player and a seasoned designer. However, I do think that a lot of people who aren't very experienced in the industry like to talk about those things because it gives them kind of like a base of operations. Like, they can start understanding things from this baseline now. So it is just this kind of thing where I see the same cyclical conversations come up,
Mm.
maybe with each generation of new designers, which is like roughly every year or so, where they just kind of rehash the old things again. It's like, I don't need to talk about that. I don't need to engage. It's okay. They can do that. They'll figure it out themselves. And they'll probably most likely come up to the same conclusions we did, that, yes, this is a role playing game, or yes, that is art, or whatever it is, whatever those conclusions are by the greater zeitgeist of that particular generation of game designers or players. So yeah, I see it all the time, and it is frustrating, but it's also I think part of the growth of people coming into the industry or into the
Uh,
hobby.
I think it's understandable, and don't get me wrong. I think that there's a fairly large generational gap in the playing demographics in Spain,
Sure.
because we started playing then in the 90s. Role playing games went down, and there was a time when we had very few role playing games, and it was only after the noughties when role playing games started to really come back in Spain.
Okay.
So we have now people my age, 40, 45, 50, over 50. And then we have people in the early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s. And the generational gap is pretty huge. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they need to have those conversations. But because there is this youthful desire for dominance, there is a massive pushback against somebody who is not interested in this kind of conversation,
Yeah,
or simply doesn't agree with the kind of resolutions that they reach.
yeah.
So it's a bit like, yeah, just stay there and play. I'm happy staying here and playing. That's it.
No, no, I get that. I think it's a real interesting thing. And I guess this ties right into our discussion about the tabletop mentorship program, because there is a huge generational divide between some of the mentors and mentees, and sometimes there's none. And
Mhm.
there's also a huge experiential difference between the mentors and the mentees, and sometimes there's very little. So tell me, I am only ever a mentor for the tabletop side. Oh, sorry, the role board game side, but you are mentoring in the role playing side of things.
That's
How's that
correct.
going? What do you feel is different about that?
I cannot say what's different because I've never mentored somebody for board
Oh,
games, because I don't know enough about board game production or design to be able to mentor somebody. I know what I like about board games and what can make a board game interesting or not for me, but I cannot design a board game. I've never done it, so I wouldn't. But role playing games, yes, I can. So I don't know what the difference is. I know what my experience is with my mentee, with Stefan, and it's probably this is going to sound like Paco Garcia, you're just this is possibly the most rewarding thing I've ever done in the world of role playing games. It's just it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm loving every single second of it. It's brilliant.
I think that's great to hear. Mentorship is so valued to me. Like, I love being a mentor. I think it's so important that people who are just even one step ahead of another person help other people get to that level. Um, and if you want to think about it from a altruistic point of view or a selflessness view, sure, there's definitely some selflessness to it. But I will also say that as a mentor, you learn a ton from your mentee. You learn from the interaction. You learn because they have questions that you've never ever thought about before. Or you're like, I don't know that, but let me go find out. Or, you know what? I don't know that, but I know somebody who would, and let's get together and talk with them. And now you're learning alongside, right? And it's that I think that sense of humbleness about mentorship, where it's not like game tabletop teacher program or tabletop
Mhm.
expert program. Mentorship is very different, and I think
Yeah.
the more people that realize that you don't have to be an expert to be a mentor, the better, because we'll have more people mentoring each other, right? Mentorship
Yeah.
doesn't mean you need an expert like license or a credential, or you need to have 17 games published or whatever. I mean, it helps, it does, but it doesn't mean that's the bar that you have to cross to become a mentor in name. Or lots of people probably mentor, they don't even know it. The idea of mentorship where we have somebody who's gone a little bit before, somebody who's a few steps behind, and we're just bringing them along with us, as well as instead of letting them languish in their ineptitude or ignorance or whatever. Um, I think that's great. The other thing that happens, I find, with the mentorship program is that the mentees are the ones that drive most of it anyway. It's not the mentors.
No, and the thing is that they should.
Yeah.
The point about mentoring is, as far as I'm concerned, is this program is not about me. It's about my mentee, and I'm not here to become a better designer or become a better writer or a better publisher. I am here for them to become a better publisher and a better designer. And me learning things, that's a side effect that I welcome
Yeah,
very much.
it's a bonus, right?
Correct, but it's not something that I am looking for. So as I said to Stefan the first time that we spoke, I am the tool that you can use to develop and realize your project. So, as you said, what I know, I will transmit. The ideas I have, I will make them yours. And if I don't know something, I will find what it is, or I will find somebody who does know,
Yep.
and figure out together. That's what it is. So for me, this is not about me. This is about Stefan, and this is about his growth, both as a writer and as a person, because this is helping him as a person immensely, which is what's making it so absolutely wonderful.
Right. So, what are the benefits that you think he's got so far from your relationship together?
Mostly is a sense of safety and a
Oh,
sense
okay.
of guidance. Okay, I have asked Stefan if it was okay to disclose this, and if I could talk about him freely, and said that
Yeah.
yeah, that's absolutely no issue. So because he has a ADHD, and it's starting now to take medication for it to bring it under control. And to develop this product that he wants to do for the Spire is something that he wants to focus on, so it can help him, But he's never been able to either concentrate enough or to be able to focus enough on the project to be able to do it, and thus he's been very insecure about his own ability to
Right.
write and design and develop.
That makes
So
total sense.
so what what he's getting from me is these, hey, why don't you do this? How does this sound to you? And he can choose whether he goes for it or not. It's
Right.
entirely his decision. But so far, um, some of the ideas that I've given him, which is what, for me, it's been so absolutely wonderful, is that he's extrapolating them not just to the development of the game that he's working on, but to the rest of his life.
Oh, that's really neat.
So that to me is just like, yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. So you're almost acting like Jiminy Cricket, if you remember Pinocchio, the little cricket
Yeah,
that sits on Pinocchio's shoulder as a guide, right? You're not like bossing him around. You're not telling him this is what you need to do. It's like, hey, here's some options,
yep.
right? And what would you say that you've gained or how you've grown from your relationship with Stephen? What has changed in you?
I think me, I have to say the desire to continue doing this, the safety that now I know I can do this.
Right.
Because I have never mentored somebody in this way. In fact, I don't think I've mentored anybody since I stopped being a psychotherapist, since I stopped practicing in the UK 6 years ago. So I haven't done this. So for me to know that, what, yes, I can still be empathic, understand somebody, and I can still give them ideas that even if I know very little about ADHD, but I can still manage to contribute, and it just makes me happy. I don't know. I guess that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing that's not changing me. It's making me happy.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that, if you write a book, if you write a game, you're touching like hundreds of lives, thousands of lives potentially.
Mhm.
But when you touch one life like this quite intimately and make some behavioral changes in that person or help facilitate the behavioral changes in that person, that's a better way to put that. It's so rewarding to see somebody be successful, right? To share a little iota of your part in that is very valuable. And it's really interesting. As a therapist myself, I have to talk about you know coaching more than therapy. So I practice what's called solution focused therapy, which is more like coaching when you think about it. But the idea behind it is that I don't ever want to do work. I am a super lazy therapist. No, that's part of it. But my metric really is, if I'm doing more work than the patient, what's really happening here? That's not supposed to happen. And the same, I have the same view towards mentorship. Not that I'm providing therapy to the person, but that, hey, if I'm doing more work than they are, something's
Something's
wrong.
going
Something's
on. Yeah.
wrong with that relationship. So I like what you're saying. You're just giving little tidbits of information. There's no expectation. It's not loaded. It's not like you must follow this or I'm going to leave you as the mentor.
No.
It's, hey, this is a suggestion. Here's what you can do. Here you have a vision for this that I don't necessarily share or know, but if you share it with me, then we're going to get aligned better, and I'll help you reach that vision because it's your vision, not my vision. And I think that's
Correct.
another part of the mentorship that gets not lost, but we have to remember that it's not the mentor's vision that gets fulfilled; it's the mentee's vision that gets fulfilled. So lots and lots and lots of stuff there that is really important to talk about. I think the idea of coaching to me and mentorship to me is exactly that. It's like I'm trying to facilitate
Correct.
your experience without doing all the work for you, so that if you take me away, you'll still know all those things. You'll still have all those skills. I didn't do it for you. I didn't just flat out tell you this is the answer.
Correct.
I might have showed you a way to do that or showed you a resource, and now you have that resource, so you don't need me anymore. Which is exactly what I think mentorship should be like. You should not necessarily need to be there forever,
No.
and you don't have to be the only mentor. There could be many mentors.
Absolutely, and I could be the mentor for this project, and then somebody else could mentor him for a different, larger, different project. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
But absolutely, I mean, one of the things that I spoke with Stefan at the beginning is, what is the length of time that you would like this to go for? And he said, well, I would like to have this done within the year. I said, okay, that sounds very doable. Tell me what your project is all about. Well, I want to create a code for the Spire. I said, okay, you know what? I think after having spoken to you, you probably can do this in 6 months. So I think between 6 months and a year is very doable. I can be with you throughout this time. Anytime, that's absolutely okay. If we finish sooner, that's great. If we take 2 years, that's absolutely fine. If you can meet one Wednesday, that's okay. And if you cannot, that's absolutely fine. If you like my ideas, that's fine. And if you don't, we'll find somebody else. But it has to work for you, because the motivation
yeah,
has to be in you, not in me. So yeah, and I'm basically doing, apart from taking some notes to know what we have spoken about, so I can remember, because otherwise I'll forget when we meet on a weekly basis. He's doing all the work. He's finding the religions that he wants to base his culting. He's making the NPCs. He is read all the books that he needs to read. He's done all the doodling that he needs to do, and I've just simply enjoyed the show. Just loving how it's doing and how passionate he's been about it. So I think that's how it should be.
yeah. I don't think anything different than you do on that. I think it's a wonderful way of looking at it. Now, tell me about some of your projects. You have mentioned Forbidden Library. You've also mentioned that you're trying to kind of make a link to a lot of different types of publishers, specifically Asian publishers, for
Mhm.
this round of what you're doing. But first of all, tell me about the Forbidden Library. What is it, and why should people be interested in it?
Well, the Forbidden Library is a writing competition that I've done and started literally the day before yesterday. It's I've been doing this for 10 years. I started my website in 2010. I started the YouTube channel in 2011 and the podcast, doing interviews. And even though I stopped for a little while between 2015 and 2017, because I was moving back to Spain and starting a business and doing another business, and the whole life was a debacle. But I've been doing this for 10 years. And I've always wanted to do this to give to the community. I don't care much get in return. I love doing the videos. I love doing the interviews. I love recording and reading RPGs and board games. So I don't care much. But I thought I wanted to encourage people, to enable people to actually write and show their creativity. And one of the things that I don't see enough of are competitions that are truly fair. I see too many writing competitions where people say, "Oh, we reserve the right to publish whatever you give us in whatever form forevermore, and it's going to be ours, even if you don't win anything, only because you're going to your work could be associated with this big brand." And I'm a bit, I don't like that. I
No,
don't
why
like
would you?
that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I decided I wanted to do something that would be quick to read because I don't have neither the attention span or the time to read a big, massive, 100,000 words campaign. And also I wanted to make it fair. I didn't want to be the judge of the competition, so I decided to recruit a diverse cast of judges. And because I am very privileged of knowing an awful lot of people in an awful lot of places, I have people. I'll have the Jeff Richard, who is the creative director of Chaosium, as one of the judges, and Lynn Hardy, who is one of the line developers of Chaosium, as judges. Elizabeth Chapraditko, who is one of the co-owners of Angry Hamster Games, and she knows about horror, I can tell you, which is brilliant. Steve Dempsey, who's written for Pelgrane Press, and Scott Fitzgerald Gray, who's an author and also a proofreader for Wizards of the Coast, an editor. So these are people who they know their stuff, and they're going to take a look at the adventures completely anonymously.
Oh, cool.
So they will be given some punctuation to originality, to how the illustrations work, to how the adventures being organized, and then the three winners are going to get real money. They're going to get 150 euros for the first prize, 100, and then 50 euros for the second and third prize. So I wanted to do something that people could say, 1,000 words is doable.
Yeah, 1,000 words is very doable.
Cosmic horror is cool. It's cosmic horror. Like,
Sure.
I like it. I like it. And this could be fun. And if I don't win, I have an adventure that I could put in Itch.io or Drive-Thru or whatever, and I can
Yeah.
sell it or give it away or just have fun with it.
Right.
It's going to be theirs. I'm not going to do anything at all with it. So
I think a lot of people who are new designers just need to do something and put it out in the world and then iterate on it, right?
Yeah.
And with the digital tools we have today for things like itch.io, I haven't really done anything on it, but I'm just looking into it because friends have done it. It's like, oh, that's actually pretty cool, because then you can like put new versions up and you can do all these things that are really very difficult to do in board games. So I'm really interested in the digital proliferation of RPGs as a media, and the idea that people just need something to stick up on a Patreon or an HIO or Drive-Thru RPG or something. Doesn't even need art. Literally could have nothing on it except the text, and you could still, people will still pay something for it as it is worthy of. It's a creative effort that was worthy of some money, right? And I think helping people generate something, giving them a hook to say, here's a prompt, write about this, submit it, because then they have an audience, they have a deadline, they have a goal to write towards, they have a feeling, so they don't have to think of everything. Like looking at a blank piece of paper like this is not blank, but if it was, it would be very intimidating to a lot of people, especially new writers who are like, I don't know what to do. But when you have contests like this, you get a whole bunch of ideas, a whole bunch of constraints that actually frees your mind up to do a lot more of the actual writing part, as opposed to the, who is this for? How many words should this be? What is subject matter? Now we've got 1,000 words. It's due by this time. When is the due date, by the way?
The due date is by August 31st.
So by August 31st. And is this through GMS magazine or through something else?
I know it's through GMS magazine. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show the link right now because we got it. So Oh, I even spelled it wrong. So let's
That's right.
spell this correctly. No, it's a link, so we need to
I'm
spell it
sure.
correctly. So if you go to www.gmsmagazine.com, you will find a link there for a
Yeah.
submission. And the
Correct.
submission is due by the end of August, and it is 1,000 words ish.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it goes a little bit over, a little bit under. I just don't want, the
6,000 words.
Odyssey
Yeah,
correct,
yeah.
and it has to have some sort of illustration or a map. And
Okay,
then
cool. That's an interesting addition. Okay, good.
well, I wanted to do it with an illustration or a map for one reason and one reason alone. And the creative director of Chaos is going to see all of these things.
Right. Okay.
I'm not joking. This is going to be seen by people who can spot you, and these are companies who don't look outside very often.
True.
So it's never a bad idea to use these chances to actually show what you're capable of.
Yeah. Right. If you're a good artist, not a great writer, still submit it. Right. If you're
Absolutely.
if
Join
you're
together. Join
yeah
together. It doesn't
yeah
matter
or
if you
partner with
know an
somebody. Right.
artist. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if two of you work on the same thing. I don't care. I care that you submit something cool that Jeff and Lynn and Elizabeth and Steve and Scott are really blown away, and hopefully
Right.
they look at that and say, okay, maybe this is worth developing. Maybe this is something that we can
Right.
work
They can
with.
find somebody out there like some diamonds in the rough. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so don't submit anything that is not your own work. Like don't use other
No.
people's artwork
Oh,
or other people's maps. It has to all be original compositions, original artwork, original map work,
yes.
and then get that in, and you have the chance of putting your work in front of a really talented board of
Mhm.
of people who will judge that work for you. Hopefully, are they getting feedback from the judging?
Uh, to start with, no, because we don't know how many entries we're going to have.
Okay.
To be honest, they are pretty busy. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
they're not idle. So even just reading 1,000 words can take some while.
yeah.
And
Especially if you're being
I've
thoughtful
been
about it.
yeah. So but to start with, I don't think there will be a lot of feedback being given. But if there is any, I will make very, very sure it's relayed to
Fair
the
enough. Fair
others.
enough. And then the people who wins can win some cash, but even more than that, and it's we talk about exposure as being a bad thing. Well, that's only if it's just exposure, right? Only exposure kills creatives. We get overexposed.
Yes.
But the idea of putting your work in front of people who move and shake in this industry, they're movers and shakers,
Mhm.
that is a good thing. That's not a bad thing if you know what you're going in for. And the other things that have been very clear in the contest, and again, go to the website to read up about it. There is like no transfer of ownership, no transfer of rights, none of
No.
that. You own that thing. Even if you submit it, lock, stock, and barrel, it's yours. Whoever created it owns it. And so you can do whatever you want with it after. You can reiterate it. If you don't do great, if you do okay and win, you're like, hey, great. Something's happening with this. Now you can
Yeah.
put it on whatever.
Anyway, I think that the thing is, you're absolutely right that exposure does matter. But what I didn't want people to do was to work for free. One
Yeah.
thing is to give them exposure to these judges. That's absolutely cool. But at the end, they end up with something that belongs to them. It's not like
Yeah.
me coming to them and saying, "Hey, if you write 1,000 words for me, I will make sure that Chaos will see it." No, it doesn't work at all like that.
It's still theirs, right? Which is
Yes.
a cool thing. Um, so in terms of this, what else are you doing on your page? Are those submissions going to be readable by the general public, or are they not?
No. Let's see. Some of them might, but generally, I said I am not going to publish right away because
Right.
what somebody told me, Steffi Devine, in fact, mentioned understandably, and I haven't thought about that before, is if I'm going to sell this afterwards, some websites demand exclusivity. So if it is published on your website, then it
Right.
has already been published. I cannot do it. So that means that I need to measure, and that's what I said. Okay, I will not publish anything on the website unless I ask for permission So if I see something that's really worthy of publication, I will let you know. And if you allow me, then I
Yeah.
will publish. Otherwise, no.
Yeah, and I think there's different sites that work in different ways. So, for example, I believe itch.io does not care
No.
what you do with your stuff because it's your stuff. So if you sell it on one site and another site, and also itch.io, they're fine with that. But there are definitely other companies like that will not uh, treat in a manuscript that has already been published somewhere else. So just be aware of what you're doing out there. Let's move on to another subject that you want to talk about, which was publishers from Asia. So what's the
Yes.
deal? What are you looking for? Are you looking for board game publishers, RPG
Yes.
publishers, all publishers?
Well, mostly board game publishers
Okay.
rather than RPG publishers for one reason, and is the language barrier. Um, when I started going to Spiel in 2011, and as you can imagine, I don't know if you've ever been to Spiel, but it's
Nope.
overwhelming. Oh,
Yes.
it's amazing, absolutely amazingly overwhelming. But one of the things that I noticed, and this is me being such an ignorant fool, I had no idea there were so many games from Asia. So every single year, I used to spend at least a day interviewing designers from Asia. And
Yeah.
the thing is that most of the most original ideas come from that part of the world. My favorite solo game is Chevy.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
There's a
And
lot of interesting stuff over there. So Tokyo Game Market is one of my bucket list conventions to go to at some point, just because it's this really nice place. So, it's a smaller convention, but it's really like a maker fair where the people who made the games, they usually like hand make them in terms of like they printed a bunch of copies, stitched them together by hand, and have a box. They made the box by hand, they glued it together, they stuck something on top of it. It's a game, and they're like some of those games you will never ever get again because that's
exactly.
the only place they'll ever sell it, and they have 500 copies of it, and that's it. And then some of the other games will eventually go into mass market or bigger markets, depending on if a publisher likes it or not. And some of those we end up seeing over here, like a bunch of games like Seiji Kanai made or something like that. They might have all started at something like Tokyo Game Fair, where it's a very different mentality. It's a very different
Mhm.
ethos towards game design. It's very maker centric, very like handcrafted, bespoke style. 500 copies, never to be seen again type stuff. Not because it's like, oh, we're trying to increase FOMO or fear of missing out. It's just that's all I can physically make by myself, right? Because there's not a lot of game printers, game manufacturing in that country. But there are a lot of people who are very interested in systems and design and things like that.
Mm.
And so they make these cool games, and they're typically small because space is a very big commodity in Japan.
Yeah.
And so they're typically small footprint games that are very mechanically interesting and narratively interesting and have a different style to them that you wouldn't necessarily see from a European game or a North American game, which is where we see most of the games come from. So definitely, Asia has been a market that has been, underserviced, maybe a little bit under tapped in terms of looking for talent. A lot of it is the language barrier because unlike Europe and definitely unlike North America, it's like a huge population where we all speak roughly the same language.
Mm.
And Europe, similarly, there's definitely lots of different countries that speak lots of different languages, but there's usually like a unifying language between some of the areas, right? And English is obviously quite well spoken across quite a bit of Europe. But that does not exist in Asia.
No, no,
It's not a thing. So
no, exactly. So that's why I'm interested in getting games, and also to be honest with you, because I stopped covering board games for a while,
yep.
and the media outlet has blown completely so huge in the few years that I didn't do enough, that if I try to do exactly the same, I just would be a little trepidation. I want to do something different,
Okay.
and I don't feel that Asian games get the attention that they deserve.
Right.
And I just want to have a niche of something different that would allow me to see games that I'm more, interested and curious about. And hopefully, again, maybe somebody will look at these games and will be able to come to the publisher and say, "Hey, how about we make Sakura Hunt to, bring it to the US and sell a few thousand copies because it's cool, or Night Catchers, or Generalship, or Manhattan, or Shelby,
Yeah.
any of the thousands of games that
Yeah,
was
and
there."
I think there's a lot of market for that. So, um, you should. Here's what you should do,
Mhm.
is just um, you know, post something like that in the Maple Syrup Shop Talk if you're a member,
Okay.
because there's lots of people who are very savvy in that regard there. You should talk to Eric Price of
Oh
Japanime
yes.
Games, because that's literally all he does.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of people on Twitter. If you tweet something, I'll tweet it out, I'll retweet it. And a lot of my friends are very much into games from Asia. Like Suze obviously loves games from Asia. Um, she's like a big fan of Oink and all sorts of games like that. So let's get you some names,
That'd be amazing.
and then definitely look into Smooks Chen. He is one of the
Oh
leading
yes.
proponents of
I,
like Taiwanese games.
I have interviewed him several times at Spiel, and
Yep,
he's one of the guys who, he has this massive booth at Spiel with several tables on each side and
yep.
some
And
games on the side. And
those are
it's just
very
amazing.
similar to the Tokyo Game Market style of stuff, where it's like
Yeah.
a lot of little independent designers who
Yeah.
come together under one banner. And then Korea, there's a lot of game in Korea. So yeah, just tweet something, I'll retweet it. We'll see what we can catch in the net of people from those areas of the world. Definitely in the big three of the Far East. But then again, I know a lot of people in Malaysia who are gamers, lots of people in Indonesia, lots of people in the Philippines. So,
That'd be cool.
we could connect you with Southeast Asia, East Asia. And then there are definitely some South Asians. So even in the mentorship program, there's a couple people from India who are starting to make games. So there's
That's
lots
cool.
and lots and lots of stuff out there. There's a whole world of other styles of games and game design that we don't know because we're, still quite Eurocentric and North American
That's
centric, right?
yes,
So
exactly. So that's why I want to change. One bit of advice that somebody's given me, my friend Angus Abramson said, "Oh, you know what you should do? But why don't you, instead of going to find the publishers themselves, why don't you try and find the game cafes in those countries?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
they will be able to tell you exactly who the publishers are,
yeah,
and they will even give you the list of the games they have,
yeah.
and that's the best way to find out." I thought, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea. Actually, I haven't thought about that."
And one of the things that I read yesterday, which is a great statement, I'm pretty sure it was from a Filipino RPG writer, pretty sure, who said something to the effect of, "We never waited for, European or North American players to discover us. We just designed stuff anyway. Like we just didn't care. We designed for our whole population." And so there's some pretty cool games, pretty cool
Mhm.
RPGs that have come out of Southeast Asia specifically, where there's a lot of Filipino game designers who are writing some really cool stuff. So
Yeah.
you should definitely take a look at the RPG side of things too.
The RPG side, I loved when I took a look at it in Spiel, and the issue is the translation because it's an
Yeah,
awful lot. But I saw, one of the, I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the game, but it was basically a role playing game about making your own K-pop band, and you were going to make a music band, and that was what the role playing game was all about. I thought, "Wow, this is genius." This is absolutely amazing. No need for big creatures and big fighting or big anything, but you have to figure out your ego and uh, your audience and what your struggles are going to be within the band itself and
yeah,
with your managers. And I thought, why don't we have these ideas? Why can't I bring this? And of course, because translation from Japanese into English is very expensive.
Yeah, but I mean, there's definitely a lot of more of that coming out of the indie scene, anyways. Now, in North America and English speaking countries, so you'll see them. Um, there's definitely a lot. I mean, we have a game about bands, so
Yeah.
it's there. It happened.
Well,
Uh,
yes, and you have written some very indie, very cool games. So.
yeah, thanks. But I think there's a lot of uh, less like power fantasy, less historical dungeony type stuff.
Hmm.
Um, when you have different experiences and different people and wide and
Yes,
varied cultures, exploring games, that's what you're going to get. So, I think there's some very fascinating pieces of game design that are out there right now because of differences, because of queerness, because of multiculturalism, because
mm,
of very different experiences, because of diaspora, because of all these things that happen in the world. And games are like a reflection of life, right? They're a
yes,
reflection of what we live. And now, because of small press, because of digital press, people are able to get that out there. So it's not just
the
this is
big people.
the experience of power fantasy fighting monsters in a dungeon, which is great and fun and don't
Yeah,
definitely how I got into it. But also now I'd rather play games about you know teenage superheroes or crime fighting from a journalistic standpoint, or whatever else there is. I'd rather do that than
I agree.
swing a sword and slay a beholder. I mean, I've done that for 48 years of my life almost. So 42 years of my life. I'm not that old yet. 42 years of my life, I've played Dungeons and Dragons, and I still play Dungeons and Dragons, and I like it. But I think there's other experiences out there that are equally as valid, if not more so,
Yeah,
based on a lot of what those experiences are bringing to the table. And I don't think you'll find them as easily if you just keep looking in one place. That's
I
the thing,
agree.
right? You
I
can only go to
agree.
that well so often, and then I think you need to get a little bit more diverse. So yeah, we'll link you up with all those people.
That'd
Just
be amazing.
get on Twitter, tweet something out. I'll retweet it, and we'll see if we can catch a bunch of publishers from different parts of the world for you.
That would be absolutely amazing. Thank you. Appreciate
No
that very
problem.
much.
So, we're winding down. It's pretty late for you. So let's just show everybody where we can reach you. We can reach you at gmsmagazine.com. If
Mhm.
you're on Twitter, you can find Paco literally at GMS Magazine.
Yes.
You can find me at Maple Syrup and at Senfong Lim, SenFoonglim. Those two accounts are locked currently, but if you could find me and you want to be added, I will go through all of your contacts. If there's nobody that I've blocked, you're pretty okay. If there's people that I've blocked in there, sorry for now, you're gonna have to sit out for a bit. And that's just because I am trying to protect myself and my community from some nasty stuff that's been happening on the internet lately. Um, if you like what you heard tonight and want to see more of this, check us out on Patreon, www.patreon.com/peoplesyrup. By the way, I don't know if you do this, Paco, but if you say www, you are immediately identifying yourself as old.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of
Okay.
links now are just patreon.com/peoplesyrup. I'm serious.
Okay. I'll remember that. I mean,
Yeah.
looking like this, I don't need to say www to look old. But I will keep it in mind when I want to be
Yeah.
one of the cool kids, one of the
Yeah.
cool
Well, you want to
people.
be
I
one
will
of the
just
cool
say,
kids.
okay, I will just say patreon.com. Yes.
Yeah. So to wrap up the show, being somebody in the tabletop mentorship program, can you give one piece of advice that you would like people to know, or maybe a piece of advice that you wish you knew when you started writing RPGs? What do you think? What's your final
The
advice?
Well, my final advice is find the balls of the imposter syndrome and kick it as hard as you possibly can. If you feel imposter syndrome, kick it in the balls and destroy it, because it doesn't matter what's telling you. Your work is never, ever, 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 ever as bad as you think it is. Never. And everyone should have a go at publishing and writing and putting things out there and developing creatively. So my advice is, if you have imposter syndrome, kick it in the balls. If you cannot, be the best imposter you can be, so everybody will think that you're the real thing. But
There you
don't
go.
let it ever drag you down.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Kick it in the balls if you can find them. Excellent advice from Paco. Next week on the Maple Syrup Show on the Wednesday, we will have the team from the Chroma game that is currently on Kickstarter coming to talk to us. Last week they couldn't make it because of an injury, so this week they're coming. We'll have them on the Wednesday night show. I don't know what we're doing on the Friday night. We'll figure it out. But until then, we will see you later. Thanks very much for staying up so late to talk to us, Paco. It's
Anytime,
great to
anytime.
talk to you, and we'll see you soon. All right. Good
Take
night,
care. Thank
everyone.
you for having me.
No problem. Bye bye.